Hi everybody, Professor Simons here, coming to you live from my car. That's right, it's a 2018 Chevy Malibu. Y'all jealous? You shouldn't be. Here's the deal. I wanted to record this video, obviously, inside my home, but some of you even noticed in the last video, we're going through major construction. So there's a lot of loud noises in there, loud banging. So then I thought, all right, I'll just drive somewhere nice. And then I realized the construction people have blocked in my car in the driveway, so I can't go anywhere. Then I was like, I'll just record it outside. Then it started raining. So now here we are in my car for episode 1 of what I like to call Chevy Malibu Life Lessons and Grammar Hacks 2020, the quarantine won't get us now. Let's talk about transition sentences, all right? Here's the thing. All of my neighbors are watching me and they all assume I've been kicked out of my house. Transition sentences. So, I'm sure all of you are asking the same question. Jeff, what's a transition sentence? Well, I'll tell you. A transition sentence is, very obviously, a sentence that transitions from one paragraph to the next. And it's really a very simple sentence. Here are the things you need to know. First, make it dumb. It is not a very entertaining or interesting sentence. You don't want to add any new information, because if you're adding new information, you probably need a new citation, and then you're not transitioning, you're just continuing your argument. So, first and foremost, keep it really simple, keep it really straightforward. Next! It should have some elements of the previous paragraph and some elements of the paragraph that is to come. You mix those two together, and basically there you have it, there's your transition. Last question you may have, do you always need a transition sentence? And the answer is no, not really, because sometimes your paragraphs are so closely connected that they actually already kind of merge from one to the next. But, depending on your thesis, depending on your structure, depending on your argument, you may have two paragraphs that are so disconnected in a way that you need to take the reader's hand and say, hey dum-dum, we're done with this topic, we're moving to the next one. For example, let's talk about Willy Wonka again. When we've talked about Willy Wonka in the past, one of our arguments is about the character of Willy Wonka himself and how he's kind of a sociopath. And one of our other arguments is about the Oompa Loompas. If you just end one paragraph about Willy Wonka and start the next one with, and then the Oompa Loompas, your reader might think, what the hell is happening? What happened to connect those two? So you need a sentence that says something along the lines of, a sentence like, Willy Wonka may not be the only character that hints at a horror movie. Now the reader knows, okay, we're done talking about Willy Wonka, but we're moving on to another character or set of characters that still proves the point. Make sense? You don't realize how dirty your car is until you teach an English class in it. That's when you realize, whew, I gotta clean. I don't know if this will work, but let's try an example. Let's do an example here. Let's say the thesis we're trying to prove is all English classes should be taught inside a 2018 Chevy Malibu. That's our thesis. So our first argument would be something like community. Why not? If you learn inside a Chevy Malibu, pretty close quarters, you're going to get to know each other pretty well, you're going to have a good community. That's our first argument. Second argument could be something like it opens up space inside the actual school for classes that take up more room. Things like, I don't know, gym class or biology lab, more free space in the school. These two ideas back to back are going to be kind of disjointed. So you need to take the reader's hand and say, we're going from here into here. So it would just be a brainless sentence, something like, community is not the only advantage to teaching class in a 2018 Chevy Malibu. Or something like, this sense of community also frees up extra space. Something that directly says, here was our argument, here's the next one. That is basically all there is to a transition sentence. It is a brainless sentence that takes the reader and says, we're finished with this argument, we're moving to the next. But don't overlook it, it's actually pretty important for a cohesive essay. Guys, I'm teaching English inside my car. In some ways, this is the lowest point of my life. Moving on! Next, let's talk about defining terms. When I say defining terms, all I mean is this. If your thesis has a term that the average person might not know, then you need to make sure you define it for him or her. You need to make sure that the reader understands all of the elements of your thesis. Disclaimer, never write a sentence like Webster's dictionary defines friendship as whatever. Don't use Webster's, don't use the dictionary. Use your own clear definitions, because that's what this is. This is your paper. So if your definition of a horror movie is blank, blank, and blank, then that's your definition. Those are the hurdles you're gonna have to leap over in your essay. Not only am I in my car, but I'm wearing these like shoes that are busted. It's been, guys, quarantine is a real mess, I'll tell you. And not only that, I'm propping up my whiteboard on like an old Taco Bell bag. Things are bleak. Next, what things do you have to define? Again, kind of the guidepost is, if the average person picked up this paper, would he or she know all the definitions? So if your thesis is something like, New York should ban cigarette smoking, you probably don't have to define anything. The average person would know cigarettes, knows what it means to smoke one, knows what New York is, know what it is to ban something. So there's nothing to define there. But in the example we've already talked about, the Willy Wonka one, there's some things to define. If I just said Willy Wonka is a horror movie, the average person might not know that movie in the first place, but even more complicated, the average person may have a different idea of horror movie than me. That's why you need to define your terms and say, okay, a horror movie is a movie that has dangerous elements in it, that is meant to evoke fear in the audience, that is somehow deadly. I don't know, I'm making it up as I go. But you get the idea. You need to define the terms for the reader. Let's do an example from my real life. I have been trying for years to convince my sister that soda is a candy. That is my thesis, basically. Soda is a candy. And I believe that to be true. But the first thing you need to do if that's your thesis is define what a candy is. For me, I would define it as something like a often sugary treat that is bad for your health, but often enjoyed in moderation. Is that the Webster's Dictionary definition? No. But that's my definition that fits pretty well with the argument I'm trying to make. And this is a thing that is really helpful in even professional papers. There's an essay we're going to read, I think, next week entitled, "Is Professional Video Gaming a Sport?" And people have different opinions on that. What is a sport? What is not a sport? So if you're trying to prove that video gaming is a sport, the first thing you need to do is define that term, because my definition might be different than other people's. Depending on your definition of sport, maybe golf isn't a sport. Depending on your definition, maybe mini golf isn't a sport. Depending on your definition, maybe even something like bowling is not a sport. I don't know. So you need to define for yourself and for the reader, here's what I mean, and then your essay can hit those markers. So, to review, we talked about two things today: transition sentences and defining your terms. Transition sentences are pretty easy. It just means if you go from one argument to the next argument and those two arguments are kind of different, you need one sentence that bridges the gap and tells the reader, okay, we're going from here to here. Defining your terms, also kind of easy. All it means is if there's a part of your thesis that either is vague and needs to be clarified or not the average reader would understand, you need to provide the definition so the reader knows, okay, here are the parameters. When I say sport, I mean blank, blank, and blank. When I say candy, I mean blank, blank, and blank. When I say horror movie, I mean blank, blank, and blank. It sets up the perimeters for you, the author, and for the reader to say, okay, if I achieve each one of these steps, then the thesis has been proved. Or it's just straight up saying, here's the definition of this term, dum-dum. Okay, that would be it. Thank you for joining me in my classic 2018 Chevy Malibu. I'll probably do another video later today once my house is freed up a little bit. I want to go over some of the answers to the handouts that I've been giving you. But until then, I'll see you around. Thanks for listening. Stay healthy, stay well, stay at home. Keep yourself sane. Bye, everybody.